Yeah.
Switch back to your near camera.
In the
There
display.
you go. Now hit camera 1. Change display window.
You don't have a lot of control.
Okay. Now do it there. Okay, Mike, all we need is your computer now. Good. EIPs. Now we're good to go. Have a good class.
Thank you. Okay. We are into some customization issues. And so that's where we're going to go today. We finished talking about the home page. Everybody, real quick, for just a moment, I want you to bend your screens down so that you can't see them. Don't close your machines so they fall asleep. We don't need that, but I don't want you cheating. Terry, give me 2 major reports that you run from the home page.
That I run
From the home page. What home page? Okay. Whitney? An exegetical guide and a passage guide. Mike, what is the primary difference between an exegetical guide and a passage guide?
passage guide is going to mainly break down the passage based on giving commentaries and all. The exegetical guide is going to break down word by word. Well, I can say this way: one's more geared towards the original language, the other's more geared towards English.
Okay, 2 significant parts, and he said them both. The exegetical guide is based more on the original language, starting to build that bridge from the English to the Greek, so you have the opportunity to dig into the original languages a bit more. But the most important thing to remember is that a passage guide, and I hope I'm not drifting out of camera, the passage guide is dealing with the passage as a whole. So you're going to get to various things. He mentioned commentaries. What else shows up on a passage guide? Does anybody know without looking? Okay, biblical people. And what does that report do? Okay, any proper names that are in the passage. It's going to run a biblical people report. What else do you find in a passage guide? Manny? Any ideas? Okay, JR, do you remember anything else that's in a passage guide?
Yeah, there's some cross-reference where you click that one.
Okay, you're going to get cross-references. What else, Doug? I don't think that's in there. Larry?
It also gives you a link to other curriculum or divisions of the Bible.
Okay. Parallel passages, that kind of stuff, yes? Did you raise a hand, or was that a finger that you were going to take a stab at it? Oh, okay.
I think what their example was in the heading. The heading gives you the pericope.
That's in the exegetical guide. The exegetical guide breaks down the pericope word for word, but in the passage guide, let's do this. Let's close all, open home.
Can we look at our screen?
Yes, you can look at your screens now. Somebody give me a verse to study.
John 3:16.
We have already done this one.
Romans 17:1.
Romans 17:1.
17.
Romans 8:1.
That's right.
No, watch. See, it's asking you what you want to do. You can type wrong pericopes, but it doesn't know what to do with them. It's the only time, Romans 22, because let's face it, we all have typos. Romans 22. It just doesn't go anywhere. So, you want to give me a real passage, Brother Green? Or do you want me to just call on you the rest of the class?
2 Corinthians 5:7.
Second Corinthians 5:7. Make sure that you've got passage guides selected. These are really important, and the reason I'm going to start quizzing you on this stuff is because you need to start to understand where to go to run certain kinds of reports, or what you're going to get when you run those reports. And the exegetical guide and the passage guide are the two most important ones that you're going to run. So you've got commentaries. Now, why am I not seeing anything in mine?
Run the report until you told it to. You click the minus button.
Right. I have to get off camera for a second. This little plus and minus next to the title is how you expand and contract those sections. So with them all contracted so that they all look like plus signs, it doesn't run them until I click that particular one. Now this will speed up your searches and these guides. It's not giving you everything all at once. It doesn't have to calculate each one of these sections of the report all at once. It only has to do the ones that are open. So especially with exegetical guides and longer passages, it's better off, you're better off if you have some of these closed, okay? So what else is in here? Well, we already talked about commentaries. We already talked about cross-references. The Biblical People Report is in here, as Miles reminded us. Literary typing tells us what? Brett? Okay. Mike? The genre of the passage, right? Denny's been talking about that in exegesis class. Is it poetry? Is it a narrative? Is it history? Is it apocalyptic? Those kinds of things will tell us. Parallel passages, so that's going to give us parallels within the Gospels, for example, most importantly. Important words is another report that runs that tries to break out what words may be important. Notice the only one that it came up with in verse 7 is walk. Well, it's probably a good important word in that passage. Sentence diagrams that we know that we don't have any because we already talked about that. Compare versions. The other thing that I wanted you to remember, because Denny came up with such a good idea for it, was music and topics. Music links you to songs. So if you need to feed your song leader songs, run a passage guide on your major pericope and see what songs it comes up with. And that'll at least give you something to choose from rather than just trying to take a book of 1,000 songs and figure out what you want your song leader to sing about. So, okay. Now, if I'm in my passage guide, is there any way to run an exegetical guide from here? Where is it, Eli?
In the other tools.
Always remember in this upper right-hand corner, this other tools section. Now, before you run the exegetical guide, Eli, what's it going to tell us? What's the most important part of the exegetical guide?
It'll give you a breakdown of the Greek sentence.
It'll break down your verse word by word, okay? And then in that section, you're going to be able to get to those Greek words. You're going to be able to do word studies based on your passage. Now, it is not wise to select an entire chapter as a pericope and then run an exegetical guide, okay? Because it's going to take a long time to figure out, all right? Even if your pericope is longer, if you've got a pericope that you're preaching on or teaching a class on, break it down into smaller chunks if you're going to run exegetical guides so that you don't have this massive list of Greek words then that you have to study. Kind of break it into chunks. And we talked a little bit about that today, but you'll notice right in this other tools section, we've got the exegetical guide, and if we click on it, it's going to run sometime. Now, if your exegetical guide is showing you only Greek, remember that you can select a version at the top here in this top window. By default, I think it runs on the Nestle Lalande or on the UBS. And if it runs in Greek, that's fine if you can understand what these Greek words are. But if not, select the ESV reverse interlinear. We're going to talk about this particular resource more and more as class goes on. But what that allows you to do is it allows you to see the passage in English, but it's looking at the Greek words. I want you to start thinking in terms of building a bridge from the English version to the Greek version, or from the English to the Hebrew. Because the bottom line is that we can do a lot of wonderful study, and I talked to Denny about this at lunch, and I want to be careful about how I say this. If you're stuck on a desert island with an English Bible, can you learn everything God needs you to learn in order to get to heaven? Yes. However, the Bible wasn't written in English. It is a translation. And therefore, if you want to go deeper into the text and learn some of the nuances of what's being taught, you have to get to the original languages. Now, does that mean that everybody has to be able to read a Greek New Testament sitting in their hand? No. But you do have to start to explore the original languages. So understand that Greek and learning some Hebrew is going to be really important to your study and to your ministry and to your preaching. Now, I'm also not advocating that every Sunday your sermons are, let's talk about this Greek word and start, trying to show off to the congregation who doesn't know Greek and could care less what agapao is. You can start to explain the principles behind the Greek words, but you don't have to give Greek lessons from the pulpit, okay? But for your own study, so that you can go deeper, you do need to get into the Greek. We're gonna look at some things probably Thursday after I show you Colossians chapter 1 in exegesis class. In this class, we're going to play with some of the ways to find some of the things that I'm going to talk about in exegesis class, imperatives and participles and that kind of stuff. Well, you need to know the Greek to do that, and I'm going to show you a particular reason why. But understand that it's all about making bridges from the English version to the original language so that you can explore what those original language words are, where else they're used, how they're translated, and so on. Many people find it very interesting to know that the word that is commonly translated as church in the book of Acts. Does anybody know how else it's translated? Larry? Congregation. How else is it translated? Assembly. So we start to think of, well, there's got to be, if it's one English word, there's got to be one Greek word associated with one English word. That's not always the case. Sometimes you have multiple English words that are translating the same Greek word. Sometimes you have multiple Greek words that are being translated by the same English word. So this will help you search some of that out, okay? What is this little chart along the side here called? Does anybody, next to my word by word, Doug, do you remember what it's called? Okay, tell me what it does. Okay, so the word faith here occurs 243 times in the New Testament. It's called a density graph, and I never remember that, and that's why I'm going to make you guys remember it. To me, it's a word occurrence or a word frequency chart, but it is, the term density graph makes a good point. What are the bars in that graph represent if you hover over them? Yeah, that's what I want you to understand about this part of the graph. You'll notice that what appears to be the tallest bar for under faith, pistis, it appears to be 1 Timothy, and it shows you in parentheses that it occurs 19 times in 1 Timothy. Now scroll over to this long bar in the front, and it's Galatians, and it occurs 22 times in Galatians, but the bar is shorter than it is in 1 Timothy. It's a proportional indication of the number of hits per the number of verses in the book. Okay? So if a book is shorter but it has a greater frequency because of the shorter number of verses, that bar is going to be longer. So it's showing you the density of number of occurrences within the New Testament. You can kind of see that in this section of Scripture, this middle section, 1st, 2nd Timothy, Titus, that area of Scripture, you've got a higher density of occurrences of this word than you do in other places. Okay? What happens if I click on it? It brings up the graph in more detail. Now, one of the things that I want to get you in the habit of doing is clicking on stuff. in order to use this software to its greatest potential, you can't be afraid to just click on something and see what happens. I used to say that you really can't hurt it too much by clicking on stuff, but then I had a couple of students of an older generation who proved me wrong. They shall remain nameless, but at least for now. But click on things. If there's a word, if when you hover over something your cursor changes, click on it. See what it does. Today we're going to start exploring right-clicking because there's a whole bunch of additional stuff that you can do just by right-clicking. So I want you to really get familiar with running exegetical guides and passage guides. They are going to be two of the most useful features in this software on an ongoing basis. Okay? Now, we also talked about how to control the books that come up underneath these word-for-word studies. And you'll notice my first one is Art and Gingrich. It's BDAG, and then Little Kittle, and then TDNT. How do we control those books? How do we determine which books show up there? Who can remember what it's called? Doug. It's called key links. What key links did we have to adjust to control the books in this part of an exegetical guide? Key links for what?
Greek.
For Greek. And what is Greek called? What is Greek in Logos terminology when we go to adjust the key links?
Lemma?
No.
Lemma?
It's a data type. Go up under Tools, Options, Key Link. And you'll notice that at the top of that list, you're playing with data types. Okay? Data types are English or Greek Strong's numbers or Hebrew Strong's numbers. And as you control books within this environment, as you promote them to this upper window, you control which ones show up in various reports and in what order. Okay? We don't have time to go back through all of that, but I want you to remember data types. It's going to be important. We're going to begin today. We began a little bit last week starting to customize our environment. As we customize it more and more, data types and key links are going to become very important. So understand what's going on there. And there are dozens and dozens of different data types within these resources. Some of them make perfect sense. Others are harder to grasp. And why they have particular data types for some things, quite honestly, I don't understand. But I've learned the ones that help my study the most. And I learn more kind of all the time. Now, what else can happen in this section if you're not careful? You can mess things up. Okay? If you change your English data type to show you some bizarre resource every time you click on an English word, you're going to wonder why, some strange encyclopedia opens every time you click on an English word. More importantly, when you do Greek, if you accidentally promote the wrong kinds of resources, you can mess things up as well. So understand that this is powerful, but you can also mess with things. At the bottom of this window that I just opened, the key links option window, it says number of windows to open on a key link. And mine right now is set to 3. Terry, what does that mean?
That can pull up 3 different resources that you have selected, your top 3.
When?
Whenever you double click on a word.
Okay, that's one way to execute a key link is to just double click on a word. So if I double click on an English word, it's going to open my top 3 preferred resources all the time. Mike, every time I double click on an English word, it's going to open those top 3 resources, right? Doug? Only if it's in there, and that is an important distinction. If your English word doesn't appear in that resource, where's it going to go, Doug? To the next one down. So if you have your maps, for example, if you promote your Logos Deluxe map set to the #1 spot on your English key links, if you double click on a city name, it's going to open that map, which is what you want, right? But if you double click on the word work, well, guess what? There's not a map for the word work. So it's going to skip your map set, and it's going to go to the next one in your list. That becomes important as you grasp the concepts, because if you have your Logos map set to 5th or 6th on your list, always, whenever you click on a city, you're going to get Oxford, you're going to get a Bible dictionary, you're going to get all these things, but you're never going to get to your maps, because it's going to find 3 occurrences of that word somewhere in those first 5 resources. So you want to learn to promote some books that are very narrow in focus, that if you hit a particular person's name, for example, one of the ones that I think is easiest to see it in is this second book that I own called The Dictionary of Deities and Demons. Well, it's second in my list. Now, if I type the word Paul, it's probably not going to find an entry for Paul in that book, so it's going to skip it. But if I type Legion, I'm definitely going to get a hit, because that's a demon that's listed in the New Testament. Does that make sense? So it doesn't hurt me to have it higher up in my list, because it's most English words that I click on are going to fall right through it, because there's not going to be a topic that's going to register in that resource. Does that make sense, or is everybody glassing over? Okay. All right. Go ahead and close that for now. We're going to mess with key links more as time goes on. Questions about passage guides and exegetical guides? Okay. Close all and open home. What else do we run from a home page? What else can we do from a home page, Terry?
You can run your workspace.
Okay. You don't typically run that from your home page. You do that from the file menu. So I wouldn't go to the home page if I wanted to open a workspace. What else? And y'all are looking at it now, so you should be able to tell me.
Yeah.
What's another important report? 2 more important reports that we run from the home page. Word studies. Where right here where it says study word, you can type in an English word or you can type in a Greek word. I haven't shown you that yet because most of you are still learning your Greek alphabet, so I don't want to confuse you with, the letter G on your English keyboard really isn't a G when you switch to Greek and all that kind of stuff. But you can literally type Greek words into this and do Greek word searches right from that study word dialog box. What's the other study topic that you can do from the study topic? You can type in a topic like sin or marriage or love or weddings or whatever you want to type in from a topical nature and study that from there as well. What else can you do from the home page?
You have your Bible reading map.
Bible reading. You can actually custom build a Bible reading program. What example did I give of that being useful in a congregational setting?
You can print them out and give them to your...
Sure. If you're teaching a 13-week class on the Gospel of John, create a custom Bible reading plan for them. Print it out for them. And then show them that they should be reading a certain amount each night or each week, whatever the case may be. So don't forget the home page. Now, why am I doing this? Why am I going back over all this stuff? Well, there's a couple of important reasons. One is as you start, and I'm teaching you because of the flaws that I have in the way I study. As you go deeper in this software, you find less need for the home page. I'm going to show you how to run a lot of these reports from a custom workspace. But there are some things that are just flat easier to run from the home page if you just remember to go back and get it. So sometimes it's good to just remember that you can close all, open home, and type a passage guide for a particular passage, okay? So don't forget about the home page as you move on. Now, there were a couple of other things that I mentioned to you that are important on the home page, and one of them is the My Library. Why is this important, Miles?
It shows you what books are in your library.
It does. It shows you what books are in your library, and you have invested a lot of money in a lot of books. You probably have at minimum 300 or 400 books. Some of you may have 700 or 800 books. If you don't know what are on your electronic bookshelves, you won't ever use them. So the My Library is important because it's going to give you a little synopsis of the different books that are in your library. The other one that's important is the blogs. These blogs to Logo Software and to Morris Proctor's Tips and Tricks are just valuable, especially Morris Proctor's Tips and Tricks. You'll find lots of neat little things, and they're usually just a couple of paragraphs. They're not real elaborate, but it'll show you how to do something that you didn't know how to do before. And so if you really want to learn to improve using the software, then Morris Proctor's little blog is going to be very important. Okay? Okay, so don't forget your home page. Now, I want you to forget your home page. Go up to Window and put Close All. That's another little keyboard shortcut that you might want to know about, is Control-Shift-W to close all the open windows, and all you end up with is a blank workspace. There's nothing there. Now, at the end of class last week, we built a workspace, right? So, how am I going to get that workspace back, Brett?
By going to File, Load Workspace.
Okay, so go up under File.
Actually, you can do it from the home page. I found out.
Yes, you can. But with all your windows closed, how would you do it? File, Load Workspace. There is the Quick Launch section of the home page that you can run your workspaces from, but it is more efficient to learn to do it from the File menu. It becomes faster. And go ahead, you probably only have the one workspace, but go ahead and select it and then click Load. And you'll reload the workspace that you saved the last time. This, in and of itself, this will save you tons of time. Now, as you get deeper, as you learn more about the software, you're going to learn to set up workspaces. Rather than trying to do everything from one workspace, you need to set up workspaces that will help you do specific things. If you're going to do a Greek study of the New Testament, for example, then you can set up a workspace to do Greek studies. If you're going to do Hebrew studies, it's better to set up a workspace to do Hebrew studies. If you're going to do an historical study of the New Testament, then there are resources that you can open for that. One of the things that I want to caution you against is having 15 different windows all linked together in one workspace. Now, if your computer is fast enough to do that, great. That's awesome. For example, I have a workspace on this machine, and when I'm not projecting, it's fast enough that runs an exegetical guide every time I change passages. And it's fast enough to keep up most of the time. But it does slow it down, because every time I want to scroll through my Bible, as soon as I scroll to the next verse, it tries to rerun that exegetical guide. And so you can really bog things down. The last time I taught this class, one of my students was like, "This is so cool. Look at this workspace I built." And it, honestly, he must have had 20 different windows. And they all had tabs across the bottom, and it was very cool. I mean, he had a lot of resources. But I was like, okay, change to John 1:1. And he'd type, and it would start to change. And I'd say, oh, never mind, change to Romans 1:1. And he was like, it won't let me yet. Just a minute. It's got to finish. Because it had to finish jumping to something in order to get back. So you can bog down your computer to the point where it's going to be sluggish. So don't go crazy. And we'll talk about that as time goes along. This particular one we built out of 3 different pieces. We've got the NAS 95 update. We've got the ESV reverse interlinear, and we've got a commentary. Now, how did we do this? Well, I want you right now to go up under Window and do Close All, or Control-Shift-W. We're going to do it again, because we kind of touched out at the end of the class, but building workspaces is important. So I want to make sure that you know how to do it. If I'm at an empty window, how do I start to open resources? Manny? I'm at an empty window. How do I want to open my NAS 95 update. How do I get there, Manny?
Library?
Okay, through my library. Now, there are two ways. There's more than two. That's the other thing here's a little rabbit chase. There are 8,000 different ways to do things in this software, just like most pieces of software. I'm going to show you the ones that I think are the fastest, but there are other ways to get to the same information. How do we open my library, Manny? Control L is the fastest way. Now you'll notice up here underneath your menu bar, you have this row of icons and you have a My Library. And that will get you to this same window, okay? It'll also tell you what the shortcut is. If you hover over it, it's going to tell you that it's My Library and Control L is the keyboard shortcut for it. So it's a great way for you to learn what your shortcuts are. But, so open My Library. I want to talk for a minute about this My Library. Before we start opening resources, we've kind of used this a little bit, but we haven't talked about it too much. The first section is called Collections, and you'll notice that you have probably three choices. Since you haven't built any other collections, these are probably the only three you have. All known resources, all unlocked resources, and all locked resources. You pretty much want to camp out under all unlocked resources. Basically, what that is your entire electronic library. Those are all the books that you've bought, that you own, okay? And the way that you can tell is that in this window, they're all full strength. They're not grayed out. And there's a little book right next to them on the left-hand side. If it's a locked resource, if you change it to all locked resources, you'll notice that they're grayed out, and there's a little book with a padlock on it. That means that you don't own this book, and if you click on this, it's just going to ask you if you want to buy it or not. Now, the interesting thing is that you can actually search books that you don't own, but you can't get to the information until you unlock it. So if you do searches with all known resources or all locked resources, you can find some things, but then it's going to ask you if you want to buy the book. Denny?
What's the difference between that which is grayed out and that which is not grayed out, but it still has a padlock?
If it's not grayed out, it means that it's probably available on the original CDs that you bought, so it's downloadable. I mean, you actually have the resource, it's just locked. Whereas if it's completely grayed out, it means that you're probably going to have to go download the resource, or they're going to have to send you a disk. Okay? Does that make sense? So let's park for now in all unlocked resources. And for the most part, folks, I don't see that much. I mean, you guys have bought libraries that are pretty extensive. I think everybody here has bought at least a Scholars Library. Some of you have bought silver, and a couple of you, I think, even bought gold. So looking at unlocked resources, you're not going to find that much in locked resources that you aren't going to find in your own library. So now, the next section is this arranged by. I tend, and this is a flaw, again, in my way of doing things, I tend to camp out with mine selected at all. Now, with it selected at all, I can type an author's name, a title word, or a subject and get to things. So it's flexible, but sometimes it's harder to get to. If I know that I want a book by a particular title, I'm going to find it faster if I switch to title. For example, if the title of my book is Baker's Encyclopedia, well, click on title and type Baker. And I only get a list of books that have Baker in the title. Now click back to all and see all the things that have Baker. I got all kinds of stuff going on that have Baker. Because it's doing all, it's finding all the different Baker authors and titles and everything else. Do you follow that? So if you know you're searching for a title word, switch to title. If you know that you're searching for an author, for example, Denny has talked about Gordon Fee in exegesis class. He's got some exegetical books that might be valuable. Well, I wanted to see if I had those books. Well, if I leave it sitting on all and type in fee, I've got all kinds of stuff. Now this isn't too bad, but if I click on author, I have 2 resources by Gordon Fee, an IVP New Testament commentary series on Philippians, and that New Testament exegesis handbook that I was looking for. So understand that this arranged by helps you filter what you're looking for.
Question.
Yes.
Okay, under all, you put Baker. Why would some of these other books even show up? I don't see anything in there that might.
Subject.
How would Baker be a subject?
Could be somebody's name. Could be there could be a John Baker who's the subject in an encyclopedia. There could be a lot of reasons.
So, I mean, could we put in a topical word that we're studying in here?
Right, subject. Under subject, I want to type in dinosaurs. And I've got a book called The Dinosaur Dilemma. Now that's because I searched under subject. Now, do I have other books in my library that talk about dinosaurs? Most likely I do. This is not a topical search so much as it's just trying to help you narrow down your library. So this isn't going to be the most effective place to find, everything on a particular topic. Go to your home page and type in dinosaurs. For example, if I, just to prove that point real quick, if I go back and open my home page, you don't have to follow me. Notice my library stays open. While I do this, I'm going to go ahead and close it to get it out of the way. But now under study topic, I'm going to type in dinosaurs. Did I spell it right? Dinosaurs. It didn't find any.
Look under dragons.
Yeah. It doesn't look like I picked a good topic to try. So I'm not going to waste the time. But if you want to do a topical search, that's the place to do it. In your My Library, you're essentially just looking for major topics for particular books.
I don't get anything in the dinosaurs even if I put all.
Yeah. Now, I think it was Brett last week said, why do I have books that appear multiple times? For example, click to title and type in NASB. I've got Bible English New American Standard. I've got NASB New American Standard Bible 95 Update. I've got NASB 95 New American Standard Bible 95 Update. The New American Standard Bible 95 Update. The New American Standard Bible 95 Update. Why do I have all of that? It's all the same book. They're just trying to give you every form of the title so that when you start a search, or if you're looking for it, it's going to pull it up in a variety of different ways. Okay? Now, sometimes that gets irritating. I realize that. But that's why it's better to go ahead and narrow your search rather than searching under all or subject. Make sure that you're under title if you want NASB. Okay? But all that's doing is showing you all the different names for that same resource. They're all the same resource. If you went into the core of the software and deleted your NAS 95 electronic book file, all of these would disappear off the list just by deleting that one resource. Okay? You follow what you're seeing? Now, there are times when you do have duplicate entries, and I'm going to show you in a little bit how to turn these off.
Did they count all these as one book? In our library?
Yeah.
or-
Yeah, it's just one book. No, they didn't count the same book 6 times and say, you have 600 books.
Yeah,
No,
that's what I'm saying.
doesn't work that way.
I don't know, it's-
Now, one of the problems, though, with these lists is sometimes there are a lot of books that you just don't want to have to chew through. For example, let's go ahead and open a New American Standard 95 Bible. Now, when I clicked on mine, it opened my NASB, but my window stayed open. And the reason is because I keep this little keep open file, this checkbox at the bottom of this window clicked all the time. That way, when I'm setting up workspaces, I can look up multiple books and open them without my library closing every time and having to reopen it. How many of you, when you clicked on the NASB, your My Library closed? Okay, so just know that you can click Keep Open to do that. So keep it open. If you closed it, go ahead and open it again and type ESV. And find your ESV reverse interlinear, the New Testament one, not the Old Testament one. Go ahead and open it. And then go ahead and type in commentary, and let's find a commentary to open. Find a New Testament commentary somewhere at the top. Again, ours are going to be different because I have different commentary sets than you do.
Which ESV did you open?
The reverse interlinear New Testament. So just select a commentary and then close your My Library. Now all three, let's see, I opened the wrong one.
Real quick,
Yeah.
I went ahead and tried just clicking the bottom tabs, and you can click them in the order you want, and it does come the way that you want it.
Cool. That was going to be the next thing. We need to, right now they're all open and they're stacked on top of each other. So I want to arrange them. And as Brett mentioned last week, we talked about how to make sure the order is correct. And he found out that it does work by clicking on the little tabs at the bottom. I want my commentary on the far right-hand side, my ESV in the middle, and my NAS on the left. So if I think about it like that, and I click on them in that order, so I just click once on my commentary tab, then once on my ESV tab, and then once on my NAS tab, and then go up under Window, Tile vertically. It automatically arranges them in 3 even columns and put them in the order that I wanted them. That's a neat trick. When you start messing with workspaces, trying to drag windows around, I want this over here, and I want that over there, and trying to drag them all around can really be a pain. And so make sure that you're using those tricks to help you get there faster. Now, I've got all 3 windows, but I happen to open the commentary on the whole Bible. So I'm looking at Old Testament commentary. I'm looking at Matthew 1 in the ESV, and I'm looking at the New American Standard title page. So if I want to link these all together, JR, how do I do that?
You'll see there the chain link, and then go to set A, click all of it, set A.
Right. Right here in the title bar of these windows, you have this little thing that's called links. Now, we tend to think of links as like hyperlinks on a web page, but for this one icon, you really need to think of this differently. So select the link and set it to set A in each one of these windows. Once you have them all selected, it doesn't matter what current reference box you type. Type Romans 7:1. And they're all going to jump to Romans 7:1, except I opened a bad commentary. Not a bad commentary, it just isn't a New Testament commentary. And it probably is a bad commentary, too. Now, I want to show you, if you look at my screen for just a second, I just opened an IVP New Testament commentary series on 1 Corinthians. Now, I'm looking for a Romans passage, but when I synchronize these workspaces, when I change this to set A, it's going to find out if there is a book in the IVP New Testament Commentary Series on Romans, and it's going to change to that book. It's called a parallel resource, and it's nice because in a commentary set, it's going to open the book you need. Okay, so that comes in handy. So I have all of these selected, and then if I want to save this, I can just go up under File and do Save Workspace, and I'm good to go, right? Now, one of the things I want you to notice is that, and we talked about this at the end of class, is if I am in my commentary and I'm looking at some of these blue hyperlinks, for example, here's a link to 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 2, and if I hover over it, it shows me the text. So I don't necessarily have to go to the link, but if I click on it, what happens? Everything changes, okay? While I was studying Romans 7:1, I'm suddenly in 1 Corinthians 6:2, and everything changed to 1 Corinthians 6:2. I've lost the context of my commentary. I've lost the context of my scripture. And so I've changed to a study of 1 Corinthians, and that's not what I want. So we need to fix that so that we can send our Bible to it without having all these chain links follow with it. And it's called a target reference window. Select your Bible and go up under Window and just say New Window. You can do Control-Shift-N, but you'll notice that it opens a copy of whatever window I'm in at the time. So now essentially I have two New American Standard Bibles open on my desk at the same time. I'm just going to drag it over to this first column and make the column the same size. I'm going to shrink it down so that it's only about half of that column height. Now the reason I'm manually dragging is because if I just try to do the tile vertically again, watch what happens. It doesn't give me 4 equal columns. It starts to break my window into 4 boxes. So I've lost my column kind of approach. And I don't want that. I like my 3 columns. I just want another Bible. So I'm going to go ahead and retile these real quick. Except I want my commentary, then my ESV, then my...
When do you use the target?
Pardon?
When do you use that target?
I'll show you here in just a second. So I'm just going to open New Window. And I'm going to drag it around here for a second. Make it the same width as that column. Shrink it down there. I'm going to make sure that my original one is not hiding stuff under that window. Okay, that's roughly where I want it. And then in the title bar, right next to the active index icon, there's a thing that looks like a little red target. And it says Reference Target. Click on that once, just to activate it. Now when I'm in my commentary, and I click on one of the hyperlinks, you'll notice that my second Bible moves, my Reference Target window moves, but my original one didn't move. And since my original Bible didn't move, my interlinear didn't move, and my commentary didn't move. Does it make sense? Do you see how I did that? Target references are really important because when you've got a really complex workspace set up, when you click on something, you don't want every window to change your perspective. I mean, you're studying James. You don't want to leave James to go explore something else real quick because getting back can be a problem. So setting up these little target reference windows lets you jump to that space without moving your whole workspace. And now if I want to, I can just save this workspace. And now my class workspace has a target reference window in it as well. Make sense? Questions about reference targets, target references? So everybody wait.
My third window's not changing my commentary. I have link A on every one of them.
Okay, then when you're changing, that particular commentary does not have a book for the reference that you're changing to. Or it may be an Old Testament commentary and you're looking for a New Testament passage, or it's a commentary set that doesn't have every New Testament book. A lot of commentary sets don't cover the entire New Testament. One of the ones that I like is and I never remember the name of it. It's the New International Exegetical Commentary Set. Is that what it's called? It's got a really long name. Yes. Yeah, NIGTC. So, yeah. Anyway, there's only 12 volumes. It doesn't cover all of the New Testament. So when I change to a book that it doesn't have, that window, even though it's in my workspace, won't change to James, for example, because there's no James commentary for it to change to. So it just stays there. And that is an interesting problem because it will really slow down your workspace. If you have a workspace that only has a partial commentary, every time you change to a book that's not part of that commentary set, it looks to see if there is one. It's trying to help you, and it can't find it because there isn't one. And so I typically find that when I have workspaces with those kinds of resources in them, my workspace functions slower. It tends to slow it down a little bit. Right.
It also works with the ESV interlinear. I just went to Genesis 1:1 and switched to the Old Testament.
Yep. Now, we're going to talk about that as well. We're going to talk about how to control that. But the ESV, they actually set it up to have what's called a serial, I just lost the name, a serial resource association. So since the ESV New Testament interlinear does not have Genesis 1:1 in it, it knows to automatically go to the ESV Old Testament interlinear and open it. Now you can do that with commentaries, and we're going to build all of that stuff. It's really very cool. For example, let's say you have a New Testament commentary set, the one that I just mentioned, the New International Exegetical Commentary Series. I like that. But it's New Testament. There's no Old Testament. Well, I like Kyle and Dalish as an Old Testament commentary set. Well, I can create a serial resource association between those two so that when my Bible switches to the Old Testament, it opens Kyle and Dalish. When my Bible switches to the New Testament, it opens the other commentary set. Okay? So that's what's happening with some of these resources. If you go to the Old Testament, your commentary most likely isn't going to go with you because you have to tell it to use an Old Testament commentary set. So we'll talk about that. Questions about how to set up these workspaces and how to save them and how to reload them? Okay. I'm going to change mine for just a second. I'm going to close my commentary just because I need you to be able to see more on my screen. Because I want to talk for a minute about these resource windows. We've kind of been playing with them, but we haven't really talked too much about the details of them. So I want you to look at them with me for just a minute so that we understand what's going on at the top of these resource windows. The first box is called a current reference box. Basically, it's where you are. Okay? So typically, because we've been dealing with Bibles and commentaries, we've been typing in Bible references. And if you type a different Bible reference in it, obviously it jumps to that reference. This green button is called the Go button. You can type in a reference and then hit the green button instead of hitting your Enter key or your Return key. I don't find it useful to have to use my mouse that much. Once I click on my target, on my current reference box and I type something in, as soon as you hit Enter or Return, it pushes that Go button. But some people who like to use their mouse a lot will type Romans 7.1 and then they'll grab their mouse and they'll scroll over the Go button and click Go. Okay? You don't have to do that.
Just interesting fact, those people that don't like to use their mouse, like me.
if you're in the window and you hit tab, it'll jump straight up to the box at the top.
That's-
You don't have to click it there.
Yep. Anytime you're in an active window, if you hit the tab key, it automatically jumps up to that current reference window so that you can type. Okay? Now, I know Denny really likes to use his mouse, so he will not use these shortcuts. On the class blog, there should be a link to the shortcuts, keyboard shortcuts page on the Logos website. So you can follow that link, and there's a whole list of keyboard shortcuts that is on the Logos website. There are dozens of them, but the tab key is very beneficial. Next to that is the active index, and all that's telling you is what indexes are available in this resource. Now, we're just dealing with Bibles, and we'll look at this more later. So right now, Bible is the only index that's available. It's not going to break your Bibles down by page number because that's irrelevant, right? We don't search for Bibles. Turn to page 27 in Romans. We don't do that. So we don't look at that Bibles that way. But if you're in an encyclopedia or a commentary, it may have an active index of page number. It may have an active index of topic. May have an active index of Bible, depending on whether it's versified or not. So there's a lot of different things that this active index can be, but for right now, it's just going to be Bible. Next is the target reference. We just talked about that, and the chain link. We just talked about that. The next one is interesting, and it's always kind of looked like two little batteries next to each other to me. It used to be even a worse icon than it is, but it's parallel resources. Go ahead and click on it. How long is your list? Now, since we're in a Bible, it's looking at parallel resources of Bibles. So the only thing that should appear in that list are what are referred to as Bibles in the system. You shouldn't see encyclopedias. You shouldn't see commentaries. What you're looking at is a list of Bibles. Now, I have probably 30, 40 Bibles in mine, but you'll notice that I only have 7 that show up in my list. Would you like to know how to shorten yours? You probably have lots of targums and fragments and all kinds of weird things in your list. We're going to talk about how to actually change this so that you can have a set of Bibles that you study from all the time. Now, the advantage of this is that when I push my arrow keys on my keyboard, the forward and back arrows on my keyboard, I cycle through 7 Bibles. And when I'm finished with the 7th one, it jumps back to the New American Standard 95, which is where I started. For you to use your arrow keys, you have to cycle through however many Bibles are on that parallel resource list, okay? So we're gonna work on condensing that, okay? Let's do that right now. Go under Tools, Library Management, Define resource associations. Now, I also need to tell you that this is another one of those areas that if you start messing with it and you don't know what you're doing, you can mess things up, okay? You can create resource associations where you go from your Greek New Testament, and when it jumps to the Old Testament, it opens some bizarre, it opens Webster's Dictionary or something, okay? So you need to be careful in here, but as long as you think when you get in here, you'll be fine. Terry?
Were we supposed to select something under that parallel?
No, I was just showing you the list.
Oh, okay.
No, right now you need to go to Tools,
Oh, sorry.
Define Resource Associations, and you should see a window just like mine. I'm going to open mine up so that you can see it more.
Mister, I don't have that
Mister?
defines the.
Okay, did you run your update and download the Power Tools add-in like I asked you last week? If you didn't do the Power Tools add-in, you don't have this feature. Okay, so you need to run your update again, and you need to look at this make sure that in the optional section, when you run that update, you ask it to download the Power Tools add-in, okay? This is something, again, I don't know why they've made this a separate deal that you have to download, but they do, and it's something that you need to be able to use. So it's not like it's really kind of an optional thing, even though that's where it is in the update section. So if you don't have it, just follow along, maybe take some notes as you go. I want you to make sure that at the top you have two choices, serial and parallel. Right now, we're only going to talk about parallel resources. If it's a Bible, a New American Standard is a parallel resource to a King James Version. Why? Because they're both Bibles. They're different versions, but they're both Bibles. Okay? There's nothing strange about it. Now, if I'm talking New American Standard Bible to a Matthew Henry commentary, serial or parallel?
Serial.
Yeah, they're not the same. Okay? So you got to recognize that we're just going to talk about parallel resources right now. Click New. Now, basically, what you're looking at is a modification of your My Library kind of window. You'll notice at the top you can search for author, title, subject, or all. You also have a box that says Unlocked Resources Only. Make sure that that's selected. We don't want to create resource associations to books you don't own. And over here in the upper right-hand corner, you have a name. So I want you to call this resource association My Bibles. Make sure parallel is selected right underneath that name. And then in the Find box, insert your cursor and type NASB. And select the New American Standard 95 and add it. Just click the Add button, and you'll notice that it jumps over into this other window. Then go back and type the ESV. And don't use the interlinear, just use the ESV, English Standard Version. You don't need the ESV reverse interlinear. Select the ESV and add it. KJV. Do you see how I'm finding these Bibles? I'm simply typing their abbreviation. Now make sure you don't accidentally catch the KJV Bible commentary. Select the authorized version. And maybe the New King James, NKJV. Try NIV. New International Version. And maybe the Living Bible Paraphrase. I don't know what the abbreviation is, but just put Living. If you switch to title, it's easier. So Living. And I'll find the New Living Translation or the Living Bible Paraphrase. There it is, just for fun. So find the NAS, the ESV, the King James, the New King James, NIV, Living Bible. Has everybody found those? Finding them? Okay. Go ahead and say, when you're finished, go ahead and say OK. And now in your Define Resource Associations windows, you should have one that's called My Bibles. And this little window at the bottom is helping you preview what's in it. When you look in these associations, for example, when I've got My Bibles selected, the Bibles that I have selected are listed in this bottom window right down here. So does everybody have a resource association called My Bibles now? Go ahead and close this window. Now, click on the NAS 95 window that you had open in your workspace, and click on that little parallel resource icon, and you should only see the Bibles in your new association. Does that make sense? Do you see what you did? Now, important for you to understand, you haven't deleted any Bibles from your system. You haven't gotten rid of any resources that you used to have. All you're saying is that these are my core Bibles that I'm going to use all the time, and I don't want to cycle through 37 Bibles every time I hit my arrow keys. I just want 4, 5, or 6. Now, you can modify this any way you want, but now, just hit your arrow keys on your keyboard, the home and end or the forward back arrows on your keyboard, and you'll cycle through those versions of your Bible, and you'll cycle right back through to the NAS 95 update by the time you get to the end. Yes?
It didn't do that for the ESV version of the window. Why is that?
Because the other window is a Greek text, not an English text. We're going to do that one next. Okay, we're going to talk about that. All I did was English Bibles, okay? Now, your ESV reverse interlinear is a strange animal, and it has unique properties. Because it's English and Greek, you can include it in an English resource association if you want, or you can include it in a Greek resource association. But the reason it didn't change right now is because that ESV, reverse interlinear, you didn't make part of your little group of 6 Bibles. Now what I do, and this is personal choice customization, I actually include my interlinears as part of a Greek Bible resource association so that I can cycle through 3 or 4 Greek texts rather than all the targums and fragments and everything else. But that's why it didn't move. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. Terry.
Last week we were running through the same thing that we're going through right now, and how you could click on an arrow and it'll take you to the next version, or whatever version it was. I can't do that now. I don't know.
Okay, we're not talking about clicking on arrows right now. We're talking about using the arrows on your keyboard. The forward and back arrows should cycle through just those versions. Using just the arrows on your keyboard. Yep, there you go. With that window selected, using the forward and back arrows on your keyboard, you can cycle through these versions. Make sense? Is it working?
It just says the system was unable to find another appropriate resource to switch to.
Okay, then you didn't set up the resource association correctly.
Well, going to
What we did just now, you said I don't have the tabs on the bottom, so I don't have these functions, but I should be able to go through what I have right now.
Yeah, the tabs don't have anything to do with any of this that we've just been doing.
Because we did that last.
Hit your parallel resource associations. Okay, yeah, you didn't set up your association correctly somewhere. Go to Tools. Library Management.
I haven't did my update.
Oh, well then, yeah, it won't work.
No, but what I'm saying is, last week I was able to click on my Bible here and go through the different versions. And remember, I said, how do we get back to the first version?
You have to scroll through that entire list. It's the only way to get back.
Yeah.
I need to stay on the topic that we're on. I'll talk to you at break about how to fix a problem from last week. Did everybody get their My Bibles Resource Association that has the update to work? So now you have a shorter number of Bibles. For those of you that are in exegesis class, one of the things that Denny mentioned the other day, and I know I keep saying this over and over again, but I'm trying to marry these two classes, okay? Denny was talking about comparing your pericope in multiple translations, okay? Well, now you can set a core group of translations that you want to go to all the time. And they're in a little loop because you can use your arrow keys to do that. And so you don't have to run that compare Bible translations report as often because you can just cycle through it, okay? Now, obviously, the compare Bible translations or Bible versions report is better because it highlights differences in those versions. But this allows you to read your pericope in multiple versions just by hitting the arrow keys on your keyboard. And that's quick and easy. You've just created your own parallel Bible for as many versions as you want. Okay? Feel free to go back and change that My Bibles Resource Association to whatever Bibles you want. I just made you do, some of the ones that I use in mine. But if you prefer the New King James and the ASV and the Revised Standard or whatever, make that whatever you want. That's the cool part about this software, is that you can make it the resources that you want, okay? And the ones that you use regularly. Rick, when you study, what translations do you use most often out in the real world preaching?
American Standard, NIV, New King James.
So see, make sure that those are in that set so that you can just hit your keyboard and you jump right to them. Sometimes we get kind of snobbish about versions, and this software isn't about being a snob about a version. It's about making comparisons, okay? There are some people that say, I would never preach from the New International Version. It's just horrible. Well, that's fine, but what does it say about the pericopes that you're teaching? Because most likely, guess what? You have members sitting in the pew that are reading the NIV. Now, you may have all the classes you want that the New American Standard is better or the New King James is better, but when you're using different words than are in their version, sometimes it's hard for them to follow along. And I can guarantee you that in just about every congregation, there are people using the NIV. So make yourself aware of any changes, any wording that's different, and make sure that you're reading multiple versions. The first day I kind of did the joke 3 or 4 times about us all studying with multiple versions. Well, this now allows you to do that more effectively without this massive list of Bibles. You can make it a longer list if you want. Make it 8 or 10 Bibles. You can also make it 2 if that's all you want, and we'll go from there. You can do the exact same thing. Go back under, just watch my screen for a second. Tools, Library Management. I'm going to go back to Divine Resource Associations. I have one for Greek texts, and I have the Nestle Elan. I have the UBS 4. I have a couple of my syntactic Greek New Testaments, and I also have the Textus Receptus, all in a resource association, so that when I'm in one of my Greek texts, my parallel resources is going to reflect that. Let me show you real quick. I'm going to just go to my UBS. I'm going to open my UBS 4. Didn't open the right one. I have my UBS 4 interlinear open, and now when I click on this, you'll notice that I'm in the My Greek Texts Resource Association. I only have these 7 that I'll cycle through. And when I hit my arrow key, I'm cycling between those Greek texts. Okay? Now, the cool thing is that you can create resource associations for any resources. If you have 3 commentary sets that you really like, and they're the ones that you go to all the time, well, why have this pull-down list of 800 commentaries that you have in your electronic library when you want to consult those 3 all the time? Well, create a commentaries resource association and put your go-to commentaries in that association, okay? And then when you're in one, you can get to the other 2 or 3 or 5 that much faster. Does that make sense? Is anybody confused about resource associations? We'll probably do more of this later on. And for those of you that have not downloaded that Power Tools add-in, you need to do that soon. There are a lot of features that you're going to be missing if you don't have that little add-in downloaded. Okay, so we were talking about just the header of this resource when we got off on the tangent of parallel resources. but it was a good time to show you that. So next to parallel resources, you have two arrows, one pointing up and one pointing down. One is previous, and the other is next. If you click on it, you'll notice it's going to just jump within the text. Now mine right now is jumping by chapter. So when I hit the previous, it goes back one full chapter. Doesn't matter how many verses it is. It's just going to go by chapter. When I hit next, it goes forward by a chapter. You also have right next to those arrows a little tiny black arrow. And if you click on that, you'll see what your choices are. For example, I can change mine to Bible book. And I'm in Romans. When I hit previous, it jumps to the beginning of Acts. It goes to John. When I go forward, or excuse me, not forward, next, it jumps to Acts, it jumps to Romans. So you can control how these jump by using the little tiny black arrow that's next to those large up and down arrows. Does everybody see that? You've got choices of article, Bible book, Bible chapter, Bible verse, or even resource. Markup is an interesting one. It's grayed out in mine right now, but we'll talk about that when we get to marking up your Bible. Does anybody write in their Bibles? You can write in your electronic Bible. It's really cool. You can do all kinds of stuff. And I'm not just talking about taking notes on a verse. I'm talking about putting squiggly underlines under things and highlighting things. And I noticed Terry used that a lot today in exegesis class. I was kind of sitting where I could see your screen, and you were using highlighters to help you figure out the text and stuff. It's really neat. You can write in your Bibles electronically. It's very cool. So you can control previous and next. And then the next two windows are back and forward. Now back and forward work just like your back button and your forward button in an internet browser. Okay, right now they're going to do the same thing as previous and next because I just clicked on a bunch of stuff. So I'm going to go back through those same paths. But basically it's where have you been? Whatever verses you've been to, your back button will get you back to those verses. Your forward button will get you forward to those verses. Now, I want to show you an interesting thing, and I expanded my window so you guys could see it well, but sometimes when you create workspaces, these windows are crunched down. And so you can't, like right now, I can't get to my back button anymore. It should be right here, but it's gone. So how do I get there? Well, see this little double arrow? If I hover over it, it says More Buttons. If I click on it, there's the rest of my title bar menu. So now I can get to my back button if my workspace doesn't allow me to get there directly. So those buttons aren't gone. They're just hidden. And it's just always right here in this upper right-hand corner. And you also have little black arrows next to back and forward. These are quicker ways to get to a verse that you've been to before. Let's say you want to go back 5 or 6 verses. Rather than hitting the back button 5 or 6 times, you can just scroll down to what's in the list and get to it from there. It's just like an internet browser works. I think we're all pretty much familiar. We don't have any people that are too much digital immigrants in here. Most of you guys are digital natives, so you guys have used internet browsers enough to know that. These last two don't help as much in Bibles, but they're going to really come in handy when we start talking about the early church fathers and that kind of stuff. The first one is called Toggle Contents Page. And when you click on it, basically what it is it's an index. It's a table of contents. That's why they call it the contents pane. You're looking at the table of contents for your particular book. So right now I'm in Acts, chapter 1, verse 1, and it's showing me where in the table of contents I am. Now, I'm in the Bible, so it's obviously showing me in the New Testament section, and I can expand this table of contents and contract it to get to where I want to go. If I just click on the little plus sign next to Philippians, I can click on Philippians chapter 3, and I can jump right to it. Now again, for Bible stuff, most likely the quickest way to get to Philippians chapter 3 is going to hit tab and type Philippians 3 in the current reference box and just jump to it, rather than use a table of contents. But when you're in encyclopedias, when you're in early church fathers and that kind of stuff, using the table of contents can be very important. The other thing that's going to be helpful is that when you're in some of those references, finding out who the author is. For example, in the early church fathers, again, I don't particularly like the way Libronics handles it, but it'll send you to a section, and if you cut and paste out of that section in the early church fathers, it's just going to tell you early church fathers, so-and-so publisher, page whatever. Well, it should be citing Irenaeus or Chrysostom or Augustine or whoever the author is, and it doesn't do that. And it drives me nuts that it doesn't. But if you open up the contents pane, it's going to show you whose writings you're in. Do you remember in Language and Research, there were times where you found a quote, and you had to look in the index, the table of contents in the front, to see that they were actually, that particular passage was written by Gregory or whoever. It's the same thought process here. You just have to open up the table of contents. Okay, does that make sense? You can go ahead and turn that off. The other thing that the table of contents, the contents pane does, that kind of drives me a little crazy, and it's not the fault of them, takes up a lot of room, doesn't it? It really narrows the window that you have available. And so I don't keep it open all the time, but I open it when I need to. The other one is the locator pane. The locator pane is like breadcrumbs. Have you ever been to a website where it shows you your path across the top of the website? You know, it starts at home, and then it goes to the About Us page, and then it's an article about our history, and then it shows you where you are. And it lets you kind of go back through that history of how you got there. Well, that's what the locator pane is doing. It's showing you where you are in the resource. Now, it's not showing you the whole table of contents. It's just showing you where you're located in that particular resource. So, I don't find the locator pane as helpful as the table of contents pane. Mike, you have a puzzled look. Is it making sense, or is it just painful?
I'm in it, and I keep bothering, just getting frustrated.
Okay.
What's the difference between the locator?
The locator is just showing you your immediate context. The table of contents is showing you the entire resources table of contents.
Oh, I'm just trying to figure out why you never use the locator.
Well, again, in a Bible context, it's not as useful. We'll show you when we get to the early church fathers.
Okay.
A lot of this, I'm prepping you for doing some work in the early church fathers later, which is, it could be easier. Let's put it that way. I'm not going to say it's difficult, but it could and should in some ways be easier to search and do that kind of stuff. Questions about those menu items and how they all function? You're going to have the same group of icons no matter what kind of resource you're in. So even though we were doing this in a Bible, you'll notice that your commentary has the same menu items, a dictionary has the same menu items, everything. Now, there are times when you will be missing a couple of things. One thing that you may miss, and it doesn't happen very often, but I have seen it, is that you won't have a current reference box. That means that that electronic resource isn't really searchable. You can read it on your computer, but it's not, you can't just type in a page number and jump to a page number. There are no page numbers in the book. Or you can't type in a chapter heading and go to the chapter. There are no chapter headings in the book. So there are a few, and every now and then I run across one, where there's just no current reference box. And that means you basically can scroll with your arrows to go through the electronic text, but it's not a searchable book. And that happens in some of the more what's a good word to use? I don't want to say mundane, but the more obscure resources where it's just a little paperback book they've turned into an electronic resource. Might be on expository preaching. Well, it's a great book on expository preaching, but they don't expect you to be searching it and doing that kind of stuff so much. So, questions about any of that? Okay. I want to go back, now that we've looked at these menus, I want to go back, open your My Library again. Your My Library becomes extremely valuable. The Control L should be something you don't even think about anymore. Because if you want to get to a book, opening your My Library window is the most effective way to get there. I want you to notice, and we're going to start to explore this, take any book in your resource and hit your right mouse button. You'll notice that you have some choices. And it's really too bad Levi's not here today, because Levi in LNR was whining and complaining one afternoon that books don't carry an MLA citation on the title page. He was saying, it should just be right there, exactly the way you need it. Well, you'll notice this copy citation to clipboard. Guess what? In electronic books, it has exactly what Levi wanted. You can actually copy the citation to your clipboard, and then if you open Microsoft Word and hit paste, Control V, it's going to paste all the information you need to make a citation into your Word document. That's pretty cool. Now, it's not exactly in MLA format, but it's close enough that you can rearrange a couple of the pieces of information or underline the title and that kind of stuff, and you're right there. So for the rest of your time at Bear Valley, when you have to write papers, if you're citing books that you have electronically, you can find it in your My Library, copy the citation to the clipboard, paste it into your bibliography, underline the title. Sometimes you have to get rid of a couple of extra pieces of information, but you're done. And it's right there and it's ready to go. Okay?
What about books that you don't own in libraries? Can you cite those?
No. I don't think it'll let you. But we'll try that during break, and it is break time. So we'll go ahead and pick up My Library afterwards. Switch your resources, Eli, to all unlocked resources, and try to do it and see if it works. I've not ever tried it on a locked resource.
You know, all locked resources?
Yeah, all locked resources.
Yeah, it should.
It does? Paste it into a Word doc or something.